Hi, my name is Rosika and this is The Midnight Reader. Welcome to my channel if you're new around here. I'm a lifelong bookworm and I recently had a kid. Go me! So I am just finishing up my maternity leave, which because I live in the US is about 3 months, and I'm very lucky to have had a paid maternity leave because of the state I live in. Oh! Wow, that took a turn. Good omens for what's to come. That was a very stable start. Anyway, I'm actually going back to work in 2 days, so I figured now would be kind of a fun time to wrap up all the books I read on maternity leave. Most of my time and energy was spent on trying to keep my tiny creature alive. Most of the reading that I did was in the dead of night, true to the channel name of being the Midnight Reader. I've gone back to my roots and often in kind of a sleep-deprived fugue state accompanied by like screaming that pierces the noise-canceling headphones. Brief side note for any new moms out there, if reading books right now seems like the most impossible task because trying to get your own basic hygiene needs met is an insurmountable task, that's fine. I've been there. It gets better. I will say most of my books that I read were after like the 6-week mark when my little girl started sleeping a little bit better. You do not need to read books right now. That is a-okay. I'm not doing this parenting thing any better or worse than anybody else out there. This is just what happened to me, and I thought it would be interesting to see if A, I remember any of these books that I read and can tell you anything about them, and B, what my overall enjoyment of the books was. So this is going to be kind of like a speed wrap up, but also just a glimpse into whether or not I remember anything that happened. Because sleep deprivation is torture. Remember, it's torture. I read 19 books on maternity leave, and I'm gonna round up to 20 because there's one book which I will get freaking done within the next 2 days. First up, I read Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. This was my first Ruth Ozeki book. I had never heard of her. I hadn't read anything by her. I simply dove into the book because I loved this cover, and I saw it just floating around on my available books at my local library. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed this book because it felt like fancy literary fiction that didn't actually make me feel like a moron. I could actually follow what was going on. If I remember correctly, it's told by 2 narrators over the course of 2 timelines. A diary washes up in a little like Hello Kitty lunchbox on the shores of a remote Canadian island into the hands of this writer, also named Ruth. There's a little bit of strangeness to this because the author's name is Ruth, as is the main character, who's also a writer. The character Ruth's husband has the same name as Ruth's husband in real life, and characters are living in a location that Ruth and her husband lived in. It's sort of pulling from her real life into the fiction realm. I hadn't seen that before. The other storyline is told from the perspective of a Japanese schoolgirl at an unknown time range. The writer is both reading the diary and also really concerned of how this came into the ocean and into her own belonging, whether or not it was associated with the tsunamis. It's a really interesting read. People might not like the ending if you don't like a little bit of magical realism, science fiction-y stuff in your literary fiction, because it does get a little magical at the end. It talks about like maid cafes and Buddhist nuns and life in a remote Canadian village, and I really enjoyed it. Next, I read Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen. As you can see, this is a point in maternity leave when I was just grabbing things because I was like, colorful! Seems interesting. This was a book about a housewife who sort of hates being a mom, and her child is kind of terrible. She sort of hates being a wife, and she's taken into this world of counterfeit luxury handbags by this former college friend. They just sort of embark on this heist thing where they're trying to make crime happen, but it's Gucci. Did not care for it. I don't really live in this world of glamour handbags. I don't really care about it. It was really kind of slow plot. There was a big twist reveal at the end that I felt like could have been the very first twist in a thriller. I got to that part and I was like, oh, I'm bored. Didn't like it, gave it like 3 stars. Next was The Beach House by Jane Green, which could have alternatively been titled Everyone in Connecticut Has an Affair. This is a very easy beach read, a cast of characters that I believe they all somehow wind up in this Hamptons bed and breakfast. Hamptons or Nantucket? It might be Nantucket. It was very confusing to listen to an audiobook because there were so many characters, and again, everyone had a secret or an affair, or both. Solid beach read. I gave it like 4 stars. Next, I read Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. absolutely loved this book. Instant favorite. I made a whole book review about it, which I will link up here if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts, but it's written by an Indigenous author who's both a botanist and a poet. She created this book, which is a series of essays focusing on things in the natural world like strawberries or a pond, or there was one on nuts. There's definitely one on nuts. And she would use these essays to sort of weave in Indigenous wisdom as well as our responsibility to the natural world as human beings on planet Earth. And I loved it, and it was wonderful, and it made me cry multiple times, and I don't think it was just the hormones, although the hormones weren't helping. Next up, The Constant Rabbit by Jasper Fford, which I might have. I do! So I bought this book about a year ago in a really cool bookshop in New York in a town called Croton-on-Hudson, I think. It was called By the Dam Books because it's by a dam. It was really funny. I went there with my friend Jay, formerly of YouTube. I don't think she's on YouTube anymore. Jay, when are you coming back? I know you in real life. Jay, you left me on YouTube. Jay! This is called lateral bullying, and I'm trying to make our friendship work online as well as offline. The Jay-assance is coming back, okay? You have to come back. I miss my friend. I got into Jasper Fford because my friend Chelsea recommended another book by him called Shades of Grey, and I read it, and it was the most strange book I'd ever read, and I adored it, and they're impossible to describe in a way that makes them sound good to read. We're gonna try. It's a fiction book set in Britain after what is called the anthropomorphic event, in which all of Britain's rabbits and a couple of other types of animals become humanoid, large, talking, thinking beings, and then they struggle to integrate in our society. And it's kind of a cross between 1984, Watership Down, and some kind of Monty Python bullshit. It's really funny, and it's also basically a book about Brexit and current UK politics. It's really good. It just is. It's really, really good. 5 stars, and I will read more Jasper Fford. Why don't more people talk about him? He writes really interesting books, even if they're very weird. Next, I read Born Standing Up, A Comic's Life by Steve Martin, and I read this because I was, at the time, binge watching, what is the name of the show? Only Murders in the Building with my husband. A big Steve Martin fan, always have enjoyed his comedy, watched a lot of his movies when I was younger, so I thought I would read his little biography. It's very short, it's very funny, it talks a lot about his comedy and life in the 70s, funny and thought-provoking. Next was Outlawed by Anna North. Also, I bought this with Jay. I was trying to get through some of my TBR, my physical TBR that was on my shelf, and I was just really enjoying reading physical books for a few days. I gave this 4 stars. This is a dystopian Western. I would say this is similar to another book I read, Upright Women Wanted. Basically, in this society, if you cannot have children, it's sort of considered like contagious or like a bad thing for the town. Like you're kind of like a bad omen. And when bad things start happening in your town, you're blamed for it because you're a barren woman. So the only real options you have are to run off into the wild and become an outlaw. I enjoyed it. It was definitely more well-baked than Upright Woman Wanted. If you enjoyed that book, you would probably kind of like this one. Same sort of vibe. There were a lot of characters in this, and in doing so, their stories all became a little bit diluted, and also the main character was the most boring of the bunch. I read it. I enjoyed it. It was just okay. Next, I read Under One Roof by Hazelwood. She's the author of The Love Hypothesis. It's a novella, so it's fairly short. Sort of a recommendation from a surgeon friend of mine who told me that to make nighttime feeds more fun when you're sitting there at 2 o'clock in the morning, you should have A, a cup of nice warm beverage, B, a nice cozy blanket, and C, a trashy romance. So this was my trashy romance, and I gotta say, absolutely worked. Thank you, surgeon friend, because it did dramatically improve my life. Can I remember anything about the characters in this book? Oh, the guy's a lawyer and Adam Driver. They're all Adam Driver with Hazelwood. The girl is an environmental scientist. So the lawyer works for like an evil oil corporation, and then the woman is an environmental scientist, and she's left the house, or like part of this house, from her former PI, her former boss of her lab, because her lab boss dies. Except the guy lives in it. He's like the former boss's nephew. Neither wants to sell it, so then they're forced to cohabitate. So it's a sort of enemy roommates to lover situation. It was pretty funny. I'm not gonna lie. Good trashy romance to read at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was very fine with it. Next, The Storyteller, Tales of Life and Music by Dave Grohl. This was because my daughter really likes the Foo Fighters. We tried playing all kinds of music to kind of get her to chill out, and she likes German heavy metal and the Foo Fighters. Huge Dave Grohl fan. I don't really know anything about the Foo Fighters. I did not know that Dave Grohl was the former drummer for Nirvana. That was news to me because I'm a dweeb. So it's his autobiography, also very funny. Lots of tales on fatherhood and becoming a star way too young. The storyteller part of the title is definitely accurate because he weaves a good yarn. Solid autobiography. Next, I read The Bird Tribunal by Agnes Ratvin. So this is a translated thriller, like a Scandi thriller, and I thought I was gonna love this. It's really thin. It's supposed to be really suspenseful. I hated this book. Because I didn't know what it was. First of all, I would say that this would read much better like as a play because there's not actually a ton of dialogue in it. Most of it is like stares and silences. Basically, this woman is running away from something and she takes this job to be like a housekeeper, gardener, cook for some man who lives out in the middle of nowhere who has a missing wife. His wife is just sort of not there and he keeps saying she's coming back, but then she's not coming back, and also we don't really know what happened to her. And it's supposed to be like suspenseful, but then it got weird. Like half the time it was leaning into horror, and then it would lean into almost like romance, and then it would lean back into like suspense thriller. I did not enjoy. And I don't know if it's because it's translated. I think it would be better as a play. Next, I read Stay True by, I think his name is Wazu. If I'm saying it wrong, I'm very sorry. It's an autobiography by someone who I have no idea who he is. I guess he's a writer, but it's his memories of essentially his college years. Growing up as an Asian American, and his best friend, who is very different than him. They meet in college and they become best friends. The friend is unfortunately the victim of like a random mugging gone wrong, and he's killed. And most of the book is about their friendship and then just trying to deal with that kind of random violence getting thrown into your life and losing your best friend. Man, he doesn't always cope with things in the best ways, and he's very aware that he's like not the best person, that he's a little pretentious, and that he treated his friend a little bit badly often. It's just his reflections on his life and their friendship. Highly recommend if you're looking for nonfiction that kind of reflects the Asian American experience. Next was Adult Assembly Required by Abby Wexman. Abby Wexman wrote another book I loved called The Something Life of Nina Hill. It's a romance. So this is another one of her romances. It's set in the same universe as that Nina Hill takes place in, which is, I think, San Francisco? LA? It takes place in LA. It's essentially this house full of people that like Nina knows, and multiple love stories are weaved throughout. I liked it. I didn't love it. It was the same sort of problem as Outlawed. Too many characters, so things started to get really diluted. You cared less about their storylines. Overall, good romance, but it was just okay. I forgot about this one. Next is Feel the Burn, a Bernie Sanders mystery by Andrew Schaffer. I saw this floating around on the available now list at my library. I don't know why I picked it up. It was hysterical though. It literally is what it claims to be, which is an intern working for Bernie Sanders goes to Vermont, murders happen, maple syrup intrigue happens. Most of the book is like Bernie Sanders just making random offhanded quotes from his like stump speeches. This Bernie Sanders in the novel likes like crappy detective mysteries, so he and the interns start trying to solve this maple syrup mystery. It's really dumb. I enjoyed it a lot. Next, If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. This has been on my radar since I read Kim Ji-young, born, I think it's 1982. I'm not sure. I can't remember the full title. I don't have that many brain cells left. So this is 4 women who are living in present-day Seoul, Korea. It talks a lot about beauty standards in Korea. One of them is a hostess. Quite a few of the characters get plastic surgery. So that was really kind of the most interesting parts. Again, problems with a lot of these like full cast books. I really enjoyed it. There were too many characters. Like honestly, this book could have dropped at least one character and it would have been more interesting because you would have been able to spend more time with them. Solid read, not 5 stars because it just got a little bit diluted at the end. Next, I read 3 books which were included in a past reading vlog, which we'll have uploaded by the time this video goes up, and they are Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane, which is a sapphic romance set in Portland over the course of 2 Christmases. Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, which is a literary fiction set in the 1960s about a female chemist and sort of the hurdles she has to overcome in life. And third was Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, which is a romance between a lady surgeon who lives in the big city and a male carpenter bed and breakfast runner who's like 10 years younger than her, and is just a solid rom-com romance. Loved Kiss Her Once for Me. Loved Part of Your World. Those were both 5-star romances for me. I enjoyed them both. Really disliked Lessons in Chemistry. I called it 3 stars. As you'll notice, I really don't rate things like 2 stars or less, because if I think it's 2 stars or less, I just don't finish the book. I didn't like Lessons in Chemistry. If you want to know more about my thoughts on these books, I will also link that video above because I do pretty in-depth book reviews on all 3. Next, I read A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab, continuing the Shades of Magic trilogy. That was recommended to me and started because of my good friend Jay. Jay, seriously, come back. I'm gonna keep calling you out like this. So this is a fantasy novel playing with multiple dimensions and a character who can travel through those dimensions into multiple Londons. I am just going to read what I wrote as my Goodreads review. 4 stars. You absolute flaming butt munch. 700 pages of good fun Goblet of Fire filler and you end on a cliffhanger? Are you freaking kidding me? The balls of this book. Move aside, please. I need to rage read the next one. And I stand by that. It's 700 pages of filler. I've already started the last one and more plot has happened in the first 4 chapters than happened in the entire second book. But I still enjoyed it, okay? And then the last book I finished was The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell, which is the Great British Bake Off set in the East Coast. It's slightly between cozy mystery and thriller. I would say it lands closer to cozy mystery than it does to thriller. All the contestants have secrets, of course, and someone winds up dead, and we start with the murder and then we work backwards. I really enjoyed it because I enjoyed picturing previous contestants as the characters in the novel. Solid read, good not great. 4 stars. If you like cozy mysteries and you're trying to get more into thrillers, this might not be a bad place to start, or if you're like a thriller girl and you're trying to get more into cozy mysteries, it's got elements of both. And the last book, the 20th book, which is almost done, but I swear to God is going to get done. I have spent 3 whole months trying to read this thing. It's called The Book of Basketball by Bill Simmons. I am reading this at request of my husband. I am enjoying it. It is over 800 pages and it is very dense reading. I am definitely not the target audience because I know just a little bit about basketball and it's super stats heavy and stuff like that, but I am enjoying it. I am almost done. There will be a review on that one because it is going to be part of a specific reading vlog. These are the 20-ish, 19 and change books that I read on maternity leave. As you can see, I read a lot of different stuff. I think I remembered most of the things, so that's the positive. Yeah, this is what I read on my maternity leave. Have you read any of these books? Do you want to read any of these books? If you're on your own maternity leave, hang in there. It gets better. They sleep eventually. And then so will you. That's all the books I read in 3 months. My amount of reading that I will do once I go back to work will start to slowly decrease, so we won't have such large wrap-ups in the future. Thanks for watching, thanks for liking and subscribing, and thank you for being kind. I hope you guys are doing well, and I will see you all next week-ish, probably. We're gonna start adding ish to things because parenting.